Hello, students and esteemed colleagues. Welcome here. I'm back with my sixth lecture in this series of Sociology of Health lectures. Today, we are going to talk about the contribution of the Marxist sociologists or Marxist perspective in the domain of sociology of health. And as we know, this Marxist perspective is also known as conflict perspective. We'll understand this also. So this lecture is divided in uh, four sections. What do we understand by Marxist or conflict perspective? Then what are the main arguments of Marxist perspective in the domain of sociology of health? Then what are the main criticism of these arguments? And finally, what is the overall contribution of the Marxist perspective on issues related to understanding of health, disease, medicine, and healthcare? यहाँ पे मैं आप लोगों को एक चीज़ और शेयर करना चाहता हूँ। बहुत सारे स्टूडेंट्स और स्कॉलर्स जो दूसरी जगहों से सुन रहे हैं हमारे लेक्चर को, उन्होंने मुझसे रिक्वेस्ट किया है कि इन लेक्चर्स को बायलिंगुअल करें ताकि हिंदी मीडियम के जो स्टूडेंट हैं वो भी इनको ठीक से समझ सकें। Although it will be difficult for me to keep it bilingual out and out, लेकिन मैं कोशिश करूंगा कि कुछ कॉन्सेप्ट्स, कुछ चीज़ें जहाँ पे थोड़ी सी मुझे लगता है कि कॉम्प्लेक्स हो रही हैं, उनको मैं थोड़ा हिंदी में भी बताऊं ताकि जिनको भी जो भी समझना चाह रहे हैं वो चीज़ों को साथ साथ समझें। तो यस, आई विल फॉलो दिस in this lecture, maybe onward also. And second thing is this, that some of my friends are suggesting me or saying me that don't keep this like a marathon. तो थोड़ा इसको स्लो रखें ताकि चीज़ें समझ में आए। तो यस, आई विल ट्राई टू फॉलो बोथ द थिंग्स। और इसकी वजह से अगर कोई लेक्चर मुझे एक टॉपिक अगर एक लेक्चर में कंप्लीट ना हो तो मैं उसे कोशिश करूंगा कि वो दो पार्ट में हो जाए, लेकिन पेस हम लोग एक नॉर्मल मेंटेन करें। तो यस, विद दिस मच ऑफ इंट्रोडक्शन, लेट अस स्टार्ट our this discussion. And the first question is, what do we understand by Marxist or conflict perspective? Basically, students of sociology do understand the Marxist perspective, but yes, some sort of revision is always good or recapitulation is always good. तो हम कुछ अवधारणाओं को, some of the concept we will revise here, and so that we can understand basically the Marxian framework. We need to understand the Marxian framework because the entire framework will be used to understand the domain of health or illness or disease or healthcare, etc., etc. And let me tell you, this Marxist perspective is helping you to understand the world of medicine in a very significant way. मुझे लगता है कि whether you are a student of sociology or not, irrespective of the fact, you need to understand this because this helps you in understanding the world of health or the world of medicine and healthcare. So मुझे लगता है कि ये हमें काफ़ी सहायता करेगी ये चीज़ें समझने में। Let us begin with some of revision of some of the concepts as we discuss within the Marxist framework. So Marx's idea of society, basically Marx looks at society from the perspective of base structure, that is also identified as infrastructure and superstructure. Marx divides the society in two parts, the base structure and the superstructure. He says that the base structure is the most important part and the superstructure is not that important. The changes caused in the base structure are actually getting reflected in the superstructure. And when he's talking about the base structure, he considers mode of production as the base or base structure, right? Which is often explained as economy. So the base structure or the economy or mode of production, these are all the interrelated things. So when we talk about the base structure in Marxian perspective, we are basically talking about the economic structure and what is meant here, the mode of production, यानी उत्पादन की व्यवस्था. Mode of production is the उत्पादन की व्यवस्था. So that is what is meant here. Now, this we need to understand this mode of production. This is very important for all of us. So, mode of production is often divided in four parts, but primarily three parts. We can certainly divide it: means of production, उत्पादन के साधन, relations of production, उत्पादन के संबंध, and technology of production, that is उत्पादन के तकनीक. So these means of production are very important. Basically, when we talk about any specific society or base structure, then some kind of production system is there. Any agriculture अपने आप में एक सिस्टम ऑफ प्रोडक्शन है, तो लैंड वहाँ पे मीन्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन हो जाता है. या अभी हम अगर कैपिटलिस्ट सोसाइटी की बात करते हैं तो इंडस्ट्रीज यहाँ पे मीन्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन है, यानी जहाँ से एक्चुअली प्रोडक्शन हो रहा है, राइट. सो दीज आर द मीन्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन. Then Marx talks about relations of production. This is very important and we need to understand it. Without this, I mean, you cannot understand Marxian perspective. So relations of production means the way people are related with or associated with the means of production, right? Marx says that every person is having primarily two kind of association, possibly two kind of association with the means of production. So if you can imagine, think of some means of production. Let us talk about this laptop. ये एक लैपटॉप अपने आप में एक मीन्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन है अगर, तो इससे दो तरह के रिश्ते हो सकते हैं. टू टाइप्स ऑफ एसोसिएशन कैन बी देयर. ईदर आई कैन बी एन ओनर ऑफ दिस और आई कैन बी नॉन ओनर, right? Or if you're talking about land, so either I can be owner of that land or I am the non-owner, right? So Marx is making use of the terms haves and have-nots, right? So those who are owners of the means of productions, they are the haves, and those who don't own, they are the have-not, right? So Marx is making use of the term bourgeoisie and proletariat. So those who are the haves, those who are the owners of means of production, they are the bourgeois. And those who are the non-owners, they are the have-nots, they are the proletariat, right? So we can say this is the relations of production, two types of relations of production. Then the third component is the technology of production. Yes, Marx is talking about technology of production. Technology is very important force in a Marxian framework. जैसे जब वो बात करते हैं historical materialism की या चार अलग अलग तरह की समाजों की बात करते हैं, व्यवस्थाओं की बात करते हैं, तो ये जो एक मेजर फैक्टर होता है वहाँ पे टेक्नोलॉजी है. जैसे तकनीक बदलते जाती है, तो टेक्नोलॉजी ऑफ प्रोडक्शन इज वन ऑफ द इम्पॉर्टेंट कंपोनेंट्स ऑफ मोड ऑफ प्रोडक्शन. Now we come to the most popular concept within the Marxian framework, that is class. Now, हम लोगों ने अभी कहा relation of production. There are two types of relation of production: haves and the have-nots. Marx is considering them as classes, right? So haves are one class and have-nots are one class. That means people who have some kind of common interest, right? People who have some kind of common interest, they are people who are having similar relations with the means of production, right? So common interest is explained in a specific way in Marxian framework, and Marx says that people who have similar relations with the means of production, they are forming one class, right? So primarily two types of relationship with the means of production: haves and have-nots. So two types of classes. Haves are the bourgeois and have-nots are the proletariat. So this much we can understand class, and then two basic classes. Now comes the most important concept in the Marxian framework, that is the notion of profit. Basically, before Marx, profit was the very important notion in industrial society. We know that capitalism came into existence only on the basis of this profit. But Marx has defined profit in a very different way, right? And Marx says that the profit of the bourgeois class is nothing but the unpaid wage of the proletariat. यानी जो प्रोलितारियत हैं, सर्वहारा वर्ग हैं, वर्कर्स वर्ग हैं, उनको जो उनकी जो मजदूरी थी, उनका जो वेज था, वो मजदूरी उन्हें पूरी नहीं दी जाती है, और उनकी मजदूरी में, उनके वेज में जो कमी कर दी जाती है, जो अनपेड हो जाता है, वही अनपेड पार्ट एक्चुअली बुर्जुआ का प्रॉफिट होता है. यानी प्रॉफिट इज actually some sort of unpaid wage of the proletariat. And this is how Marx is conceptualizing class and actually class divisions, and he is examining the notion of profit in terms of unpaid wages. और इसको वो क्लास एक्सप्लॉइटेशन कहते हैं, यानी एक वर्ग के द्वारा दूसरे वर्ग का शोषण करते हैं, यानी बुर्जुआ वर्ग के द्वारा सर्वहारा वर्ग का शोषण. राइट, द बुर्जुआ आर एक्चुअली एक्सप्लॉइटिंग द प्रोलेटारियत, and this exploitation is actually the root cause of conflict and class formation. Here, Marx is talking about another concept, that is the concept of class consciousness. Yani, when people are aware of this exploitation, then this is a kind of class consciousness. And Marx is talking about two stages of class in itself and class for itself. Marx says that when people are not aware of the kind of exploitation or the subjective status, subjective conditions related to their class, then this is class in itself. But when people become conscious, develop class consciousness, subjectively become aware of some kind of exploitation, then this is becoming the class for itself. So in Marxian framework, when these bourgeois or the proletariat, they they develop some kind of class consciousness, then they move from class in itself to class for itself. Now again, Marx is saying that there are actually two types of class consciousness, false and true, and the proletariat are having true class consciousness, and the bourgeois is generally having false class consciousness, because internal conflict, internal differences is very, very high among the bourgeois. And for having a true class consciousness, there should be minimum internal differences which is existing among the proletariat. So now what Marx suggests here is this, that there are actually two classes, bourgeois and proletariat, and then the proletariat are actually the exploited class, the bourgeois is exploiting, and then what is happening, that some kind of class consciousness is coming into existence in the capitalist mode of production, and because of several other correlated factors, and then some kind of when they are subjectively aware of, when because of this class consciousness, some sort of class conflict is taking place. Again, he's talking about class conflict, and there are the different concepts that we cannot talk about all those things. Now, for understanding the class conflict, here we need to understand one more concept, and this is the concept of dialectics, जिसको द्वंद्व कहते हैं हिंदी में, dialectics. And as we all know, Marx has taken this concept from Hegel, and Hegel talked about basically idealism, dialectical idealism, and in this framework, Hegel talked about thesis, antithesis, and synthesis. Hegel says that dialectics is actually some kind of dvand, some kind of struggle between two opposite things. So when you are talking about two opposite things, then there's one set of ideas. So for Hegel, this first set of ideas is known as the thesis, and then over a period of time, another set of ideas are actually coming into existence, and this is known as the antithesis. And then because of some kind of clash between these two set of ideas, something new is coming into existence, and this is known as synthesis, right? So again, over a period of time, this synthesis is becoming thesis, and then some kind of antithesis, यानी वाद, प्रतिवाद और संवाद, और फिर ये संवाद कुछ समय के बाद वाद बन जाता है. The synthesis is becoming thesis, and then again some antithesis and synthesis. This is the process of dialectics dialectics and dialectical idealism. Now, Marx actually took the idea of dialectical idealism from Hegel and then converted it into dialectical materialism. And you might have read the famous quotation from Marx: Hegel was standing on his head and I turn him upside down so that he can stand on his feet. यानी उनके उन्होंने कॉन्सेप्ट को उन्होंने उलट दिया, उसको आइडियलिज्म से उसे मटेरियलिज्म में कन्वर्ट कर दिया. एंड ऑन द बेसिस ऑफ दैट बेसिकली मार्क्स हैज सीन the history of mankind in 4 epochs. Epoch is a period which is dominated by a specific mode of production. Mode of production we have talked about, right? So he has divided human history in 4 epochs: primitive communism, which was a classless society, right? There was no classless society. Then he talks about the ancient society, where basically slaves were the means of production, and there were slave owners and slaves, right, and non-owners. So that was another society. Third one was the feudal society, where means of production were land was the means of production, and then there were landlords and the serfs, right? So capitalism is a fourth mode of production, society, full form of society, you can say, where the means of production is industries, right? Machines and industries are the means of production. तो मार्क्स ने 4 अलग अलग एपोक्स के बारे में बात की. प्रिमिटिव कम्युनिज्म, जहाँ पे प्राइवेट प्रॉपर्टी नहीं थी, क्लासलेस सोसाइटी था वो. एंड देन केम दी स्लेव सोसाइटी, एंशिएंट सोसाइटी, स्लेव सोसाइटी, जहाँ पे स्लेव्स थे और वो स्लेव्स वर दी मीन्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन. देन केम दी फ्यूडल सोसाइटी, वेयर लैंड वाज द मीन्स ऑफ प्रोडक्शन. Then there were the landlords and the serfs, and the fourth one was the capitalist society, where the capitalist and the bourgeois and the proletariat are there. Then Marx says that as that some kind of class conflict is prevailing in capitalist mode of production, and some sort of class conflict is prevailing in all these previous forms of societies, but capitalist system is a more appropriate for development of the class conflict, and so class polarization is taking place here, and then revolution is taking place, class conflict is taking place. And then he goes beyond. He talks about the socialist, the dictatorship of proletariat, and then the communist society sort of thing. We won't go to those things. We discuss these things. Basically, the whole idea is to understand the notion of class. The whole idea is to understand the notion of class and class interest and class consciousness and class divide, right? And that is why we are talking about these things. So after having a brief understanding of the concepts which are generally used in Marxian framework, let us move forward. I've already taken almost 15 minutes or something like that. Yes, we move to the next idea. Marxist theory suggests that it is the economic structure of any society that determines the social relations contained within that structure. Yes, as we have explained it earlier, it is the economic structure of any society that determines the social relations, primarily the 2 types of relations, but any other type of relationship. So economy is the most important consideration in the Marxian framework. Second point is this: it is the distribution of the ownership of means of production that gives rise to specific patterns of class relations. Yes, a distribution of the ownership of means of production. We talked about the haves and the have-nots, so it's talking about that. Now, the third point is very important, and basically we will try to understand that why do we call the Marxist approach as a conflict approach also, or the Marxist perspective a conflict perspective also. And it is stated here that conflict theory, with its roots in the work of Karl Marx, is based on the assumption. Now, there are several assumptions, but we have reduced them to 3. Now, what are those 3? Is based on the assumption that society is composed of various groups struggling for advantages, right? So society, there are several groups. Now all these groups are in some sort of struggle with each other for a specific advantages, right? So this struggle is there, and this is why the class struggle or class conflict. So primarily it's talking about, it's focusing on class struggle. And Marx's, we remember the famous statement by Marx that the history of hitherto existing society is the history of class struggle. So Marx says that the history is a history of class struggle. That class struggle is omnipresent kind of thing. Class conflict is a omnipresent thing, right? So there are different groups, but all these groups are in conflict with each other because of some or the other interests. Then inequality is basic feature of social life. The second important component is this, that there is no equality as such, rather some kind of inequality is existing. And then conflict is the major cause of social change. So basically changes are caused because of some kind of conflict, and actually the efforts to avoid those inequalities. So this much of understanding is there. Now, what happens when we apply these concepts in the domain of sociology? That is our interest, and that is something that we would like to know here, right? So let's move to that part. What are the main arguments of Marxist perspective in the domain of sociology of health? Right? When I'm talking about sociology of health, actually I'm talking about health and disease and illness and medicine and healthcare, right? We understand this. We have already explained these things in our earlier lectures. The sociologists looking at health from the conflict perspective are concerned with the relation between health, illness, and social organization within a society, and how their meanings and definitions are influenced by the economic activity. Right. So straightforward. You're talking about several institutions like and concepts and actually conditions like health and illness. These are the conditions, and the social organization. This organization may be a phenomenon, may be a process, or may engage several other institutions. But how these phenomenon or states or conditions are actually influenced by the economic conditions, right? Because for Marx, economic structure is the most important part. Economic activity is the most important part, right? So coming straightforward, we are trying to examine all health related phenomenon and conditions and institutions from that very perspective, relation with economic activity. Now, the focus is on the struggle or conflict between these various entities, focuses on struggle or conflict between and among the various entities, such as medical profession, drug companies, insurance company, business community, and then clients or the stakeholders or the patients, you can say. Because there are stakeholders, or you can say there are the consumers and the providers. So the patients or the person who are sick or who are ill, they are the consumers, and they are the actually exploited load. So you can mark, if we apply the Marxian perspective, we can divide the whole thing, we can see the whole thing from the perspective of class interest. Now this is what is actually conflict theory, that some kind of conflict of interest is there, right? Now why do they see this as some kind of conflict of interest? Because these groups, whether that is a medical profession or drug company or insurance company or the business community, they are getting governed by some kind of profit or maximization of profit. And as we have seen it earlier, profit comes from some kind of exploitation. So it's not necessarily exploitation of the proletariat in each and every case. It is, in this particular case, it would be exploitation of the patients, right? So this is a major consideration. Now, then we move to the next point. Marx's perspective in conflict theory is seen in the rejection of the view expressed by a structural functionalism that society is held together by shared norms and values. Yes, so by now we already understand that actually this is the rejection of the structural functional perspective, which is that society is actually bound together by shared norms and values. Because we are not talking about the shared norms and values here, we're talking about conflict kind of thing. right? So this is just a rejection of that kind of understanding. And we must remember, as we have explained in the previous lecture, that when Parsons has given due importance to the medical profession in the area of when somebody is becoming sick or ill, right? You may remember the gatekeeper role and some kind of the role, the positive role played by the doctors. Now the thing is going to be very different here. Now, among the issues of concern to conflict theorists are the major issues that we are talking about here is this: the ability of all people to obtain health care. Now, I've underlined the word all people. Basically, Marxian perspective is saying that it is the entitlement of all to enjoy actually health care. And this whole perspective is examining the things from this perspective, the ability of all people to obtain healthcare. Because what is happening that not everybody is getting the health facilities, and we can see again those who have access to health facilities and those who don't have. So you can talk about the health haves and health have nots. So you need to look at it from that perspective, the ability of all people to obtain health care. Then how race, class, and gender inequalities affect health and healthcare. Yes, we can apply other things also. For example, caste, we can talk about, right? So race, class, gender, caste, etc. These are, if they produce some kind of inequality, then how those inequalities affect health and healthcare. And then power relationship between doctors and other healthcare workers. Now, Parsons is talking about some kind of relationship between the doctors and the patients, right? But Marxists look at it from the power perspective, and then they say that the medical professionals are enjoying great power over the patients, and the dominance of medical model of healthcare. Then within this healthcare or systems of medicine, there are different systems of medicine. We'll talk about this when we'll talk about medical pluralism. But amidst different systems of medicine, right, the biomedical perspective or the medical model of healthcare, which is the product of the modern capitalist class, right? See the link between the biomedical model of healthcare and the capitalist system of capitalist mode of production. So this is the dominance of the medical mode of healthcare, and then the role of profit in healthcare system, the profit that we talked about before, right? So here we have tried to understand the larger framework within which we will understand this Marxist perspective. Then one term that most students are familiar with, and that is पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी. जब हम लोग मार्क्सिस्ट फ्रेमवर्क की बात करते हैं तो हम कई बार पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी शब्द को प्रयोग में लेके आते हैं, और हम लोग पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी ऑफ हेल्थ एंड हेल्थ केयर के बारे में बात करते हैं. तो उससे भी हमें यहाँ पे समझने की ज़रूरत है कि मार्क्सिस्ट फ्रेमवर्क में मार्क्सिस्ट कॉन्सेप्ट को हम पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी के जरिए भी क्यों संबोधित करते हैं, समझते हैं. देखिए, इसको हम लोगों ने यहाँ पे थोड़ा सा समझाने की कोशिश की है. Certainly we have taken the views from eminent authors and we have quoted them. So if you want to go for further details, you can consult those books, or you can consult my book, Sociology of Health, because most of these literature I have taken from that book, right? So under political economy perspective, good health in political terms is defined not only as a state of physical or emotional well-being, but also as access to and control over the basic material and non-material resources that sustain and promote life at a high level of satisfaction. सी बहुत बहुत बड़ा फर्क आपको यहाँ दिख जा रहा है. अब देखिए, यहाँ पे हेल्थ को और टुगेदर डिफरेंट तरीके से डिफाइन किया गया है. समझ रहे हैं ना? हेल्थ को बिल्कुल डिफरेंट तरीके से डिफाइन किया जा रहा है यहाँ पे. Under political economic perspective, good health in political terms is defined not only as a state of physical or emotional well-being. We are not only talking about the physical and emotional well-being, right? But we go beyond that. The WHO definition is talking about the state of well-being, right? Right? It says that a health is a condition of not only being free from disease, but a state of well-being. But here we are moving further from that. It is not only a state of well-being, but also as access to and control over basic material and non-material resources यानी means of production का जो अलग अलग क्लासिफिकेशन है, कैटेगराइजेशन है, जिसको हम लोग रिसोर्सेज कहते हैं, मटेरियल रिसोर्सेज कहते हैं, मटेरियल एज वेल एज नॉन मटेरियल रिसोर्सेज, राइट, सम काइंड ऑफ एफ्लुएंस. So control over basic material and non-material resources that sustain and promote life at a high level of satisfaction, meaning that a key component of health is struggle. तो अभी देखिए कह रहे हैं कि जब तक लाइफ में कुछ मटेरियल एंड नॉन मटेरियल रिसोर्सेज पे कंट्रोल नहीं होगा, यानी हमारी अपनी आवश्यकताओं की हम पूर्ति नहीं कर पाएंगे, तब तक वी कैन नॉट थिंक ऑफ गुड हेल्थ. So it's not just about having a state of well-being in an abstract sense, but it is in a concrete sense. And the concrete sense is this, that some kind of control over the material and non-material resources should also be there, right? अब इस पर्सपेक्टिव को देखिए, ये बिल्कुल नया पर्सपेक्टिव है और इसको हमको समझने की जरूरत है. Then for political economists, ill, aged and physically disabled people are marginalized by society because they do not contribute to the production and consumption of commodities. देखिए ये करें कि जो कैपिटलिस्ट सोसाइटी है, कैपिटलिस्ट मोड ऑफ प्रोडक्शन है, वहां पे क्या होता है कि जो इल हैं, एजेड हैं या फिजिकली डिसेबल हैं, उनको मार्जिनलाइज्ड कर दिया जाता है, साइड लाइन कर दिया जाता है. दे आर मार्जिनलाइज्ड. व्हाई? बिकॉज दे आर नॉट कंट्रीब्यूटिंग टू द प्रोडक्शन एंड कंजम्पशन ऑफ कमोडिटीज. बिकॉज नाउ दिस इज द critique of the capitalist mode of production and the capitalist society. Marx is saying that in this kind of society, capitalist society, actually those who are not making contribution in terms of production or consumption are not considered important and they are marginalized, and basically the ill and the aged and the physically disabled people are marginalized. That means जो ill हैं actually society उनको marginalize कर देती है. It's not taking care of that. So contrary to what the functional perspective is saying, it says that no, actually the society is marginalizing them. Then other marginalized groups such as the women, aged, unemployed, and members of the working class tend to endure greater social and economic disadvantages than those from privileged groups and have restricted access to healthcare. Now it goes beyond. फिर वो कहते हैं कि जो कैपिटल सोसाइटी है वहाँ पे क्या होता है कि जो दूसरे ग्रुप हैं जैसे अनएम्प्लॉयड हैं, एजेड हैं, वीमेन हैं, या फिर जिनको जो रिसोर्सलेस हैं, डिप्राइव्ड हैं सोशियो इकोनॉमिकली, इन सब लोगों को क्या होता है कि दे बिकॉज ऑफ देयर मार्जिनलाइज्ड कंडीशन दे डू नॉट हैव एक्सेस टू हेल्थ केयर. हेल्थ केयर एक ऐसा सिस्टम हो जाता है जिसपे सिर्फ उन लोगों का एक्सेस होता है जो ज्यादा प्रिविलेज्ड है, जो डोमिनेंट है. जो मार्जिनलाइज्ड हैं, जो लेस प्रिविलेज्ड हैं, they don't have access to. Now, what is happening as a result of this? This restricted access to health care service results in poor health or illness for these groups. तो जो ऑलरेडी vulnerable थे, यानी एजेड थे, विक्टिमाइज थे, इल थे, उनकी एक्सेस भी रेस्ट्रिक्टेड हो गई. एज ए रिजल्ट ऑफ दैट दे आर एक्चुअली गेटिंग रिड्यूस्ड टू पुअरर हेल्थ एंड इलनेस कंडीशंस. यानी अब यहाँ पे हेल्थ कंडीशन में भी एक डिवाइड क्रिएट हो रहा है, बहुत ही स्ट्रिक्ट डिवाइड हो रहा है. इसके आगे के आर्गुमेंट्स को देखिए, बहुत ही शार्प आर्गुमेंट्स हैं. दस मेडिसिन सर्व्स टू कंटिन्यू सोशल इनइक्वालिटीज, यानी मेडिसिन सोशल इनइक्वालिटीज को कंटिन्यू करने में मदद करता है. मेडिसिन सर्व्स टू कंटिन्यू सोशल इनइक्वालिटीज, द डिवाइड बिटवीन द प्रिविलेज्ड एंड द अनप्रिविलेज्ड, और जो हैव्स एंड हैव नॉट्स हैं, प्रिविलेज्ड एंड अनप्रिविलेज्ड हैं, उनके बीच की इनइक्वालिटी को मेडिसिन क्या करता है, परपिचुएट करता है, rather than improving them. यानी इंस्टेड ऑफ improving upon those, actually it is perpetuating the inequalities. यानी मेडिसिन अपने आप में एक क्लास कंपोनेंट है जो इनइक्वालिटी को बढ़ाता है, ना कि कम करता है. ये मार्क्सियन आर्गुमेंट है. आगे देखिए, पॉलिटिकल इकोनॉमी राइटर्स कमेंट ऑन द कल्चरल क्राइसिस ऑफ मॉडर्न मेडिसिन. यानी जो मॉडर्न मेडिसिन है, कैपिटलिस्ट मोड ऑफ प्रोटेक्शन में जो मेडिसिन सिस्टम आता है, जिसको कि आप बायोमेडिकल मेडिसिन के तौर पर देख सकते हैं, द कल्चरल क्राइसिस ऑफ मॉडर्न मेडिसिन in which healthcare under capitalism is perceived as largely ineffective. कहते हैं कि जो हेल्थ केयर है वो इनइफेक्टिव है, ओवरली एक्सपेंसिव, बहुत महंगा है, अंडर रेगुलेटेड, ज़्यादा रेगुलेशन नहीं है, एंड वास्टली इनइक्विटेबल, और जो बहुत ज़्यादा असमानता और असमता को क्रिएट करता है। यानी मेडिसिन कैपिटलिस्ट मोड ऑफ प्रोडक्शन में, कैपिटलिस्ट सोसाइटी में इनइक्वालिटी क्रिएट करता है, इनइक्वालिटी परपिचुएट करता है, और जो ऑलरेडी डिप्राइव्ड हैं, दोज हु आर ऑलरेडी डिप्राइव्ड एंड मार्जिनलाइज्ड, उनके डिप्रिवेशन को कम करने की जगह उन्हें वो बढ़ाता है। नो, दीज आर वेरी शार्प arguments as put forward by the political economist or the Marxist thinkers. And I think this is very important, as we stated in the beginning, that it is very important to understand the world of the medicine, the way the medical world is actually operating. So मुझे लगता है कि आज काफ़ी वक्त हो गया है और मैं इस लेक्चर को यहीं पे क्लोज करूंगा। मैं पूरे लेक्चर को नहीं कंटिन्यू कर सकता हूं, बट देयर आर सेवरल अदर थिंग्स that we need to talk about. Let me just give you a glimpse of that. So basically Marx and Engels on disease, then a Marxist approach on medicine and medical profession, then Marxist concept to the study of health and healthcare, then alienation and health and mental health. Basically, Marx has talked about mental health, and we will talk about that also. Then the main criticism of these arguments, and finally, what are the overall contribution of this Marxist perspective. So we will I'm closing this lecture at this point of time, and we will have second part of this lecture in a next video. So thank you very much for watching this, and please do listen the second part of this lecture, because that will be very important and I think very informative. I suggest that every student of sociology, whether he is opting for a paper, a sub-discipline of sociology of health or not, that is immaterial, but we need to understand health from sociological perspective, from the theoretical perspective of functionalism and Marxism. So hope you will like this, and you will share this. And yes, if you have any question or doubt, then you must write in the comment box in the YouTube channel, so that we can take up those questions. So we will meet in very soon with the second part of this lecture. So thank you very much.